New ways of farming have been explored often recently, and vertical farming has been taking off greatly. So much so that people here say that vertical farming could be the answer to an urgent need of humanity. Why do we need more vertical farms? How does it fill needs that traditional farming can't? We're going to explore all the answers and even help you find out how to create your own mini vertical farm. What is vertical farming? Well, the best way to describe vertical farming is normally as a commercially grown crop planted in vertical layers. A lot of the time, these layers are stacked on top of each other to make rows upon rows of planting areas. Most of the time, these vertical layers are kept inside of a building or a warehouse, and the farmers can completely control the environment where the plants are kept. They can control the temperatures, the lights, the water. Even factors like the carbon dioxide levels can all be controlled by the farmers. One of the best parts, though, is things like fertilizers or pesticides used to control pests on the crops don't need to be used in vertical farming. Another interesting aspect is the tech that the farmers use to control their crops, but we're going to talk more about that a little later. Why do we need alternative farming options? Because the world always needs more food, and the demand for more food grows yearly. The population is ever increasing, and most of these people end up living in urban environments where we don't plant food for ourselves and remain self-sufficient. We need the food that we eat to be available in stores to buy. Tradition is still the main way that our food is produced, but during the pandemic time, there was a massive breakdown in the food supply system, and many of the products that the farmers produced did not reach our tables. But there is another even bigger problem than that. Global change has created extreme weather conditions, and it's resulted in farmers losing their yields from extreme conditions that they have zero control over. And that's resulted in less food too. And since farming is one of the leading causes of greenhouse gases, it's a vicious circle where farming gets affected negatively, but the unsustainable farming practices are also making the problem worse. Of course, one of the best ways to combat this is to give farmers the tools to make their practices more sustainable. But there are urgent problems that even sustainable farming practices just aren't going to be able to solve. That is where alternative options come in. Let's look at some of the ways that these are beneficial. First, vertical farming can be done anywhere. Most traditional farming practices greatly depend on the climate that you live in. You won't be able to plant an exotic fruit in the desert, for example. And often, one of the biggest challenges of traditional farming is the fact that farms are far away from urban areas. Some fruits and vegetables need to be imported from far away, and that means that they need to be kept fresh in different ways that aren't always the most, natural. On the other hand, vertical farming can be done pretty much anywhere. You can create massive vertical farms right next to cities and other urban areas. And since the farmer is basically in control of the artificial climate inside the building, also aren't dependent on the weather to create the ideal climate for your plants. In addition to that, vertical farming takes less water too than traditional farming. And since droughts have a massive impact on farmers and their crops, having a food source that doesn't take a lot of water is such a benefit to farming. Plus, seasons don't really matter when it comes to vertical farming either, meaning that the produce being planted inside these farms will be available all year round, and not just in your favorite times. Next, it's space efficient. Traditional farms can be massive, with farmlands and fields for miles. But there's nothing quite as beautiful as driving past farms just before harvest season. Farming practices in the last few years have improved a lot, and the same amount of land can yield a much larger number of crops, when the weather has been favorable at least. But at the same time, the earth really isn't growing, we all know that, but the population is. We're living in a bigger chunk of the world. Space is starting to come at a premium. We need solutions that give more food in a smaller amount of space. And that's what vertical farming is all about. Because it's rows on top of each other, a lot more crops can be produced per square foot than compared to traditional farming. And it's been estimated that we need to produce at least 70% more calories and at least 100% more agricultural crops by 2050 just to sustain the growing population. The fact that vertical farming is space efficient is a massive benefit to this way of farming. It even allows for the opportunity for people to create a small vertical farm in their home or very small spaces. You can even create a small garden in your windowsill that works to produce food. There are many health benefits to vertical farming. Because the environment is controlled, there are a lot less dangers to the crops that are being produced. That means that you don't need to use all those pesticides that you have in order to get your traditional crops to maturity. Chemical-free food is always a great thing, and vertical farming allows us that. At the same time, vertical farms can be built anywhere, and that gives you local food that remains healthy, and it spared all of the shipping time and the process needed to keep it fresh. Some studies have found that increased storage times can also result in a nutrient loss in some vegetables. Without getting you that fresh, healthy food quickly, you can also get these produced all year long. Eating fresh produce without being limited by planting seasons or having to eat produce that's been stored from the previous year. And it's also really good for the environment. Fuel is saved because of transportation, and there are other many ways that it's sustainable. Have you heard of vertical farming? Have you tried it? What's your opinion on vertical farming practices? Share your thoughts with us in the comment section below. We would love to hear from you. Next up, we're going to check out some of the tech that's being used for vertical farming, and also the challenges. And we're going to answer the question if vertical farming is completely going to replace traditional farming. And now on to vertical vertical farming tech. First off, there are LED lights that are used to create artificial sunlight for your plants to grow. The farmers still need to figure out just how warm they need to make the area for their crops. And also, there's artificial intelligence combined with machine learning that's used to gather the data points that allow farmers to know what they need to add or what settings they need to be at to make their crops grow better. This can help you check the pH, the nutrients, the humidity, the temperatures, and so much more. This smart technology allows farms to be as efficient as possible. It's almost like it's engineering combined with farming. And now for the challenges of vertical farming. One of the challenges is to educate people about the possibilities of vertical farming. Some of the farmers working on these farms hope that they can share intellectual property in order to work together to build on one another's innovations. Learning together will ensure that everyone's able to build their knowledge of the field and make it even better than it is already. Creating better vertical farming practices. Another challenge to vertical farming is what to call it. Is it natural or organic? Many of the certifying authorities still require that the product needs to be outside and also in dirt, but most of the advocates feel that it doesn't really matter. If you can find a way to produce healthy food, what does it matter that it wasn't planted in the dirt? This food is still produced without chemicals and is going to be given all the nutrients that any other healthy plant's going to be given. Will vertical farming completely replace traditional farming? I guess it's possible at some stage, but that won't happen anytime soon. Vertical farming has a lot of benefits, and it definitely has its place in the food production market, but there are still some crops that just work better when being produced on a traditional farm. For crops that require a lot of vertical space to grow, like corn and wheat, traditional farming methods on a massive field is absolutely still the best way to get it. Traditional farming isn't going anywhere, but for food that has large density plants like lettuce, microgreens, strawberries, mushrooms, vertical farming can really help you out a lot. The two styles of farming need to work together to fill the urgent need that humanity has to produce more food. And if farmers can save space by implementing the vertical farming method, then they could also allow for some of their fields to start returning to nature. This would be great for the environment if we could allow more time for the earth to heal. We love farmers, and humans can't survive without them, but vertical farming can take some of the stress out of their job. Have you ever tried your own small vertical farm? How'd it go? Let us know. Thanks for watching.